السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله حمد الشاكرين الذاكرين، وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحابته والتابعين ومن سار على نهجهم واقتفى أثرهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, we want to be close. The closer the better. Barakallah fikum. Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. Inshallah ta'ala, the parents, take care of your kids. Make sure they're next to you, around you. Do not let them distract people. Barakallah fikum. وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. MashaAllah, Alhamdulillah. Yani, you have seen the khutbah. MashaAllah, our Shaykh, Jazahullah khairan, did a beautiful job to talk about the importance of coming to the Masjid, and he related that to how short this life is. And the barakah of life comes from these gatherings. Because when we sit in these gatherings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah and rahmah in our lives. Barakat of coming to the Masjid, barakat of praying in the Masjid. And Alhamdulillah, to have scholars coming to us, visiting us, that's an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored the people of knowledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored the humanity in general with the knowledge. As He honored Adam alayhi salam before He asked the malaika to, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the malaika to prostrate for Adam alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that He showed them how special Adam is with knowledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The only people who will fear Allah truly are the scholars, the people of knowledge. And many ayat. I don't want to take the time of the Shaykh. But when we have scholars, we should take the opportunity to get as much knowledge as we can from them. So Alhamdulillah, Shaykh Mawlana Abdullah and the students from the Darussalam Madrasa, they are here among us. Let's inshallah ta'ala try to get as much benefit from them inshallah ta'ala from this visit, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless us with their knowledge. Tonight our Shaykh will speak to us about his expertise, which is the Islamic finance. Our Shaykh is an advisor, right? Advisor with guidance. Yes, guidance Islamic finance. Our Shaykh, he studied in Buffalo, in Darussalam in Buffalo, and then he moved to Trinidad. Yeah, I keep struggling with the name of that island, but he studied also in Trinidad, right? Trinidad, and also he moved to Medina and he studied there as well. He got ijazah in hadith, and then he came back and he studied here in the US. So, mashallah, a lot of knowledge that we can benefit from, inshallah ta'ala. If you have any questions, prepare your questions, and inshallah ta'ala, we'll have Q&A towards the end of this session. Barakallah fikum, jazakumullah khair. Jazallahu khairan shaykhana for this visit. Assalamu alaikum.
نصلي في العشرة تقريبا 30 دقائق و30 دقائق ما ترى. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أما بعد. May Allah bless the Shaykh. There's a dua of Rasulullah sallam that Allahumma ja'alni khayran mimma yadhunnun wa la waghfir li ma la ya'lamun. May Allah make me better than what they think, and forgive me for those things that they don't know about. Because everybody has skeletons in their closet. Nobody's perfect after the Anbiya alayhimus salatu wassalam. And that's the beauty of Bani Adam. Kullu Bani Adam khata' wa khayrul khata'in tawwabun. May Allah forgive us all, and may Allah make us make us from amongst the Salihin. Bismillah. My brothers and elders, we came here, specifically they requested to speak about Islamic finance. See, the term Islamic finance, Islam, subhanAllah, Islam actually is a way of life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam a way of life. And Islam doesn't only govern ibadat. It doesn't only govern aqaid. In the English dictionary, religion means a set of beliefs. Religion is a set of beliefs and practices. That's the definition of religion. So Islam is not a religion. Islam is not only a set of beliefs and practices. Islam is a way of life, a holistic way of life which governs every aspect of the believer's life. And Islam is the deen of fitrah, the deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Allah created the human being and then prescribed for the human being the way to live, and that's Islam. It's the way of all of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, and it is what was taught to us from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, Islam encompasses, of course, aqaid, encompasses our beliefs, and these aqaid have not changed. From the time of Adam alayhi salam, Inna Allah ta'ala wahidun la sharika lahu wa la shay'a mithlahu, and there's Jannah, and there's Jahannam, and there's the Day of Judgment. This has never changed. The aqidah has always remained the same. The Sharia has changed. The Sharia, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would change it according to the need of the time. That's a whole different discussion, but it is for us to understand that Islam is a holistic way of life that includes aqidah, that includes our ibadat, our worship. So aqidah is only specifically beliefs. Ibadat is in the physical representation of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be ibadah maliyah or ibadah badaniyah, monetary or physical worship. And then there it goes on, Islam then goes on to encompass mu'amalat and mu'ashara and akhlaq. Mu'amalat are our dealings. Mu'ashara is our socio-economic, our life. And akhlaq is our character, and hukuma. Hukuma is how we rule. That's also part of Islam. And all of this was taught to us from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course his righteous khulafa after him. For he says, alayhi salatu wasalam, alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnati khulafa ar-rashidin al-mahdiyyin, abdu alayha bin nawajis. That, hold fast to my way and the way of my rightly guided caliphs, because that, and he says, hold on to it with your teeth. And that's asserting to the fact that a person is drowning, and when you throw somebody who's drowning a rope, he holds on to that rope with everything he has. He bites onto it, holds on to it, and that's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted us to hold on to, his way and the way of his khulafa. So from the way of his khulafa, so much of Islam was implemented practically, specifically during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu and onwards, where he ruled over 2/3 of the known world. And in the year 92 after Hijrah, Tariq bin Ziyad, rahimahullah, a 17-year-old young Berber Muslim, he conquered, Spain. And the year 93 after Hijrah, Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh, which was two extremes of the known world, just 92 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated from Mecca to Medina, and 80 years after his passing away, alayhi salatu wasalam. So this, and then Muslims continuously ruled over the world. See, the dark ages of the West coincide with the enlightenment of Islam, of Baghdad. And we have practical examples of Muslim rule, subhanAllah. Khilafah Uthmaniyya lasted for 750 years and onwards. The Mughal Caliphate, and there was the Ayyubi and the Umayyi and the Abbasi, and then we have practical ways of how the most beautiful times of civilization were under Islamic rule. In comparison to that, the American Empire has only been 250 years, and we see where we're at now. But the point is, my brothers and elders, mu'amalat is part of Islam. It's part of the deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent, and it's as much and even more so than ibadat, because ibadat are personal. It's between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our ibadat don't necessarily affect other people. except for zakat maybe, but we'll talk about that in detail. But my salah, my hajj, my my siyam. So what shows off Islam to the world? And a practical example of that is how the most populous country in the world, Muslim country of the world, is Indonesia. And Indonesia and Malaysia is basically the same thing. It's like India and Pakistan. They speak the same language but hate each other. So, may Allah bring love in the believers. But that's basically, so if you actually step back and look at the wider picture, Malaysia, which is 30 million people, Indonesia, which is 330 million people, Brunei, Singapore, the Philippines, all the same people. These people, Islam reached them through trade, through the trade of the people of Yemen. May Allah bless them. And subhanallah, what happened was no army ever set foot there. It wasn't through conquest. It was simply through trade, through mu'amalat, where there were rice traders. They would trade rice, and the local people there, it was common practice that the rice would have stones in it, white stones. They would, it started off because when you collect rice, they have some stones in it, and then people started putting stones in the rice. And then when the Muslims went, they hired people to sift through their rice, put the stones separate, and sell pure rice. And they were forced to sell on the market price because that was the going rate for the rice. And the people would buy the rice from the Muslims. They would go home and they didn't need to clean it. And they would say, well, how are you guys? Where are you guys getting this pure rice from? And they would say, this is the way that we were taught. We're not allowed. We're not allowed in Islam to cheat. You were paying for the rice. You're not paying for the stones. And then people started buying from them, and then they accepted Islam because of this one practice. And then the kings of Malaysia now, alhamdulillah, I studied in Malaysia for 4 years. My undergraduate degree from International Islamic University of Malaysia. The kings of Malaysia have Yemeni lineage. So not only did Allah make Islam enter into Malaysia through the Yemeni people, but Allah, because of their fair dealings, but the people of Malaysia made them their kings. They intermarried with them. The Malaysian brothers are telling us that's why that the kings have full beards, and the normal Malaysians don't have full beards because they have Yemeni blood. That's their proof. But the point is, my brothers, that's how powerful just dealings are. That's how powerful Islam is. Subhanallah, in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we study Kitab al-Buyur, when you're going through the fiqh, and we're going through Kitab al-Buyur in the books of Ahadith and the books of fiqh. There are common principles. The first major principle of of Buyur in Islam, of transaction law in Islam, is that anything which has the possibility of leading to dispute later on is batil now. كل بيع تفضي إلى المنازعة فهو باطل. Any transaction which has a possibility of leading to dispute in the future is not allowed now. Which is why you're not allowed to sell, the future child, the future baby of an animal. It's not born yet, you're not allowed to sell it. لا تبيع ما ليس عندك. You're not allowed to sell what you don't have. Why? Because what if when the guy receives it, it's not as you explained to him, and then you have a possibility of leading to conflict, so it's not allowed. So on and so forth. So that's the first major rule. And then you're not allowed to have, there's khiyarul aib, khiyarul ru'ya, khiyarul shart. Before Walmart came along and allowed these returns, 90-day returns, this is from Islam. Well, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he enshrined in Islamic law that if you purchase a product and you go home, you open the box, it's not like you have the right to come back. It's called khiyarul ru'ya. It's the right to return something after you've seen it. It was in a box, you went home, you opened it, and it wasn't like you liked it, you can go back and return it. It's khayar al-shart. You buy something, you have a choice, you have an option to say within 3 days or 5 days, whatever you agreed upon with the seller, you can just go back and say, I returned it, I don't want it. You have khayar al-aib. You go back, it's faulty, you come back, you return it. All these are from Islam. And then this goes on, it's so beautiful. And when I went there in Malaysia, and mashallah, it's an Islamic university. You had Muslim professors. They would compare, they would link everything to Islam. And we'll go into zakat because it's so beautiful later on, inshallah, last 10 minutes. But when I told them I want to study Because after studying the 7 years of the traditional alim course, which is of course the Arabic language, Hadith, and Quran, and we made mashura with the ulama that what is relevant to the time, and they said economics, right? And subhanallah, we see that after when the Khilafah was finished, was abolished, may Allah bring it back. But since the time of Rasulullah ﷺ until the 1920s, we had some sort of semblance of Khilafah, a unified rule of the Muslim world. And then through British colonialism, it finished. And then till now, we don't have a unified leader. And we won't go into politics or anything, but just to give you a picture of the ummah. So the Muslim ummah had forgotten, what we knew so perfectly, which was how to trade, how to rule the world, and to hukuma, iqtisad. And to this point where, Imran Khan, who was the leader of Pakistan, he said, Pakistan, which is, just to give you an example of the world now, Pakistan is a Muslim country. There's 53 Muslim nations in the world. Pakistan is one of them. Out of the 180 to 200 territories and countries of the world, 53 of them are Muslim nations. Pakistan happens to be one of them. Now he says, all the tax revenue that's collected from Pakistan, half of that goes into servicing the interest on loans that Pakistan owns to the IMF and the World Bank, right? So all the tax revenue that's collected, half of it goes to pay back, not the principal, just the interest on the loans that Pakistan has with the IMF and the World Bank. Picture of the iqtisad now. So the ulama, they said, go in and learn iqtisad. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to learn the sunnah of Rasulullah and implement it now. So when we went there, our teachers told us that you should learn conventional economics and then go in deeper later on to Islamic finance. So I did a degree in conventional economics. And what's so beautiful, what we found out, is so much of conventional economics is based off of Quran and Sunnah. So, subhanAllah, the equation of GDP, the gross domestic production, the equation it tells us in the equation that minus S, savings is a loss to the economy, right? And so savings is all money which is kept aside. All the savings of a country are not in the economic cycle. So they are a loss to the GDP, right? And subhanAllah, the concept of zakah, subhanAllah, you understand that so when Rasulullah ﷺ, when Islam legislated zakah, in modern day economics, we see that savings is leaked to the economy. And the reason why the government implements programs where they take and they inject, there's welfare, there's food stamps. Why? Because the government is spending some money and it's giving it to the lowest denomination of society, but society is turning back and spending that money. And when the lowest denomination of society is given $1, it's called the multiplier effect in economics. That translates into 1,000, 2,000 times more. And it runs the economic cycle, because when you give a rich man $1, he's gonna spend 10% of it. But if you give a poor man $1, he's gonna spend 90% of it because he doesn't have his needs fulfilled. He's gonna buy a loaf of bread. When a poor man buys a loaf of bread, he is empowering the farmer that grew it, the baker that baked it, the mill that ground the flour, the transporter that transported it. So you're running the economic cycle. And if that money was to be saved with the rich, it would be a leakage to society. Everybody would be at harm. So are the teachings of Islam. And so modern economy is based so much on the Islamic teachings. Now, another perspective of Islamic finance, we have to label it now, is riba. The prohibition of riba. And it's really interesting because we don't have so much time. What we can do maybe is divide half of the time for me talking and half the time for questions. But we're going to touch on riba and zakah. So, and then there's so much others, awqaf and so much sukuk, etc. But we don't have time for that. So riba and zakah. Now, riba is not allowed. So we know it's not allowed. A lot of the time, subhanAllah, I had people come up to me. He's like, I know riba is not allowed, but what is riba? So riba, subhanAllah, in essence, and the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates it so much, and in the Quran, subhanAllah, there's many major sins in Islam, but none of the major sins is so vehemently and so specifically targeted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, that Allah declares war on the people who engage in riba. Rasulullah says, شَاهِدِهِ وَكَاتِبِهِ وَآكِلِهِ, the person who witnesses it, the person who writes down the transaction, records the transaction, and of course the giver and the taker, all of them. He says it's worse than committing fornication with a person's mother. So why is it so targeted? So when you understand the economic aspect of it, and you understand how much harm it causes society, you get a better picture of it. So what is riba? See, in Islam, the only loan you're allowed to give is qard hasan. مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ أَضْعَافٍ كَثِيرًا. It's to help somebody. See, there's the haves and the have-nots. There's always been. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He has favored some people, and He has favored some people through wealth, He has favored some people through other things. Wealth is not something to be envious of. It's a favor of Allah, yes, but Allah has favored other people and other things, and we learned that from the story of Qarun, etc. Now coming back to riba, the haves and the have-nots, there will always be people in society that Allah has blessed through wealth, and there will always be people that don't have that wealth. What Islam teaches us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He declared, the kuffar, they said, why is it prohibited? It's a transaction. It's إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. Trade is like riba. He doesn't have money, you give him money, and because you're doing a service to him, you're giving him money, you deserve more than the money you gave him, right? It makes sense. That was their logic. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Yes, it's like trade, but Allah has made trade allowed. He has allowed trade, but has prohibited riba. Why? See, trade is touching the actual economy. Trade has to do with human hours. It has to do with the sources of production. Capital, labor, and capital, land, and labor, the three sources of production. Trade involves the actual economy. You grow something, you develop it, you refine it, and you sell it. Money is in itself, it's a store of value. Money isn't something itself, except for gold and silver, of course. That's the two actual sources of money. Gold holds intrinsic value. But besides gold, fiat currency itself is paper. It doesn't hold actual value. So what it represents is human labor. What it represents is the effort that mankind has put into something, and then, that's what it represents. Now, what riba essentially does, see, if somebody needs help, he doesn't have money, he comes to you and says, help me out, right? I want to start a business, I need money to put my children in school, whatever, he needs money. So he is in need. He is in need. The only time a person is, asks for money, he's in need. So Islam doesn't allow you to profit off of somebody's need. That's why back in the time, there were things that were essentially known, this is written in the books of the scholars, that you weren't allowed to buy or sell. Among them was milk, among them was fire, you need to light somebody's stove, among them was salt, among them was medicine. So Imam Nawawi, he has a treatise on medicine, but he has said that I've never made money off of it because you're not allowed to make money. Back in the old days, a doctor would make money not by, there's two types of medicine. There's preventative medicine, and there's the medicine that you pay, somebody pays you to cure him. That curing part was for free. It was done for free. The kings had doctors. The doctor's job was to make sure the king doesn't get sick. That was what the doctor was paid for. If somebody is sick, regardless of whether a king or a pauper, you cure him for free. That was back in the days. Now we've come far from that. But likewise, milk wasn't sold, grass. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. That's what Allah SWT talks about. That they, the things that are readily available, you're not allowed to stop them. Water is free. Allah has made it free. You're not allowed to sell it, etc. So is helping somebody. If somebody is in need, you have to help him for free. You cannot profit off of an individual's need, which is the basic principle of riba. Somebody comes to you for money, you give him money, and you tell him, I'll give you 10, I want 12 back. That's not allowed in Islam. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the only way you can help him is give him 10 and ask him 10 back. Now, if you want to profit off of this, you're allowed to go into a business transaction. Right? You ask him, all right, what do you need money for? You need money to start a business? Okay, I'll give you money. but I will share the profit with you, and if you lose, I'll share the loss with you. That's allowed. See what riba does. We'll compare. We have these little slides. We don't have time to prepare slides today, but have these little slides. It will be so much more beautiful. So riba and bay', we'll compare it. Riba, regardless of whether the person wins or loses, you will always win. There is no losing scenario in riba for the person who gives riba. You give 10, regardless of whether he wins or loses, you always get back 12. And in Pakistan, in our countries back home, we see the wadira, you see the people that they are oppressive. They give the farmer money. He doesn't have money to pay him back. He goes and takes his daughter, takes his land. They're in a constant cycle of debt. It's like credit card debt. You know how, you can never get out of credit card debt? It's like that, but magnified 1,000,000 times. And it's crazy. It's oppressive. So we see that practically happening. So riba, the one person is always benefiting, whether the person loses or not. The second problem with riba is that there's a conflict of interest. You benefit at his loss. What compounding interest does is you make more money the more he delays. He can't pay you, he can't pay you back, you double it, and you double it, and you double it. Think a practical example, student loans. Student loans, you go and ask a bank for money. A young kid, 18-year-old, goes and asks a bank for $100,000. They're never going to give it to him. But they will readily give it to him for student loans. Why? Because it's so profitable. Why is it so profitable? Think about it. The bank is going to give him $100,000. I've seen a post on Twitter. Somebody said, I graduated 15 years ago. I owed them $100,000. I have constantly been paying monthly since I graduated. And I looked to see how much I owe, and I owe them $175,000. Wow. That's compounding interest. Now, how does it work? See, a fresh graduate can't find a job, right? They say, job requirement, they say you need 5 years of experience. And he's a fresh graduate. So the more this fresh graduate delays in paying them back, deferment, well, it's deferred. The payments are deferred, but the interest is piling up, right? So the more he delays in paying them back, he's stuck, he's trying to find a job, he's trying to get his things together, the more they're making money. So the more he loses, the more they profit. You see how the conflict of interest is not aligned. And there's many Islamic solutions. An Islamic solution for this would be you invest in his studies. What that would mean, so we're talking now the other side of the slide. We're talking about investment, a halal way to do it. What would it be? You tell the guy, look, you need money, you need $100,000 to get through dental school or whatever. How I would help you is I'll give you $100,000, right? But I'm going to take 15% of your paycheck after you graduate for 4 years. Make sense? Now your interest is aligned. See, Allah allows bay', Allah allows investment. Allah doesn't allow riba. Now this guy doesn't have a job. The first month, the second month, what is the agreement you made with him? You're going to take 15% of his paycheck. He doesn't have a paycheck, so you're getting 15% of $0, right? So you're going to start worrying now. You're going to say, let me find this guy a job. I'm not making money. Hell, come and work for me, Let me make him some money so I get back a ROI. I get back a return on my investment. See how your interest is now aligned. It's not a conflict of interest. If he loses, if he doesn't have a job, you're losing too. It's not the other way around where he loses, the more you benefit. Does that make sense? That's why Allah allows riba, Allah allows bay' and doesn't allow riba. Now another example. See, a business transaction. A guy comes and he needs $100,000 to set up a restaurant. A bank gives him $100,000 with 7% interest or whatever. That's for houses. Now for cash, it's like 30%, right? Credit card loans, 30%. Now, and that's how compounding interest works. For those who don't know, it's you owe him 30%. So the next year, you take a $100,000 loan on a platinum credit card, 30% interest. Next year, you owe him $130,000. The next year after that, it's 30% of 130, which is how much? I'm not good at math. Even so it's how much? $210,000. And then it's 30% of 210 and just goes up. And if he couldn't pay you 130, what makes you think he's going to pay you 210? What makes you? So you see how it keeps on going up. And then you have to file for bankruptcy. So that's how riba goes. And what riba essentially does, and that's why you have revolutions. Riba creates a small island of rich people, the haves. Think about it. Who will be able to give interest? The people who have money. And they will always be getting richer. If they're giving 10, they're always getting back 12. They will continue to get richer. And the population, the vast majority of the population is getting 10 and has to give back 12. And is getting 12 has to give back 15. Giving back more than they're getting. They'll keep on getting poorer. So you have an hourglass shape, a small percentage of the population that continuously gets rich, and the vast majority of population continuously gets poorer and poorer and poorer. Sounds familiar? Right now, 80% of the world's wealth is owned by 2% of the population. Right now, that's the denomination of the world. You know, these banking families, etc. Because of interest, compounding interest, right? So, and then what happens? The vast majority of people, because they are the vast majority, they feel disenfranchised. That's how did the French Revolution happen? The people came to Queen Anne and they told her that, hey, you know, we don't have food to eat. She said, why don't they feed them cake? If they don't have food to eat, where are they get cake from? So she was so disconnected with her people, and they had the guillotines and chopped all their heads off. That's how revolutions happen, you know? When the vast, and revolutions always caused civil unrest, caused killing, chaos. Islam is all against that. On the other side of the picture, this guy comes. This is riba. Bay'a. What happens in bay'a? What happens in trade? This guy needs $100,000 to start a business. He comes to somebody. Now in riba, you don't look at how good his idea is. On the other hand, you look at what his credit score is. The credit score shows you the ability to repay. He has to be as dumb as possible and have the highest credit score possible. Make sure he has other assets you can go and repossess, and then you give him the maximum amount of loan. He's gonna fail, and you can make the most money. That's how interest works. If it's a business proposition where you share the loss, how does mudaraba work? There's a Rabbul Mal, he gives you $100,000. He doesn't have any say in the business. The mudarib now takes $100,000. If the mudarib loses out, if the business fails, the mudarib loses his time, effort, and energy, and the Rabbul Mal loses his money. Fair transaction. Now at this point, the Rabbul Mal will make sure that this guy has a good idea. He can be as poor as possible, have the lowest credit score possible. He's going to make sure, hey son, come sit down. What's your idea? Obviously, Allah has given the rich man intellect. That's how he got his money, right? Besides, of course, the taqseem of Allah, but he's going to make sure his idea is good. He's going to make sure there's a good return, 50, 60, 70% ROI. He's going to say, all right, I'm going to invest in your idea, right? Venture capitalism. Once he invests in his idea, if the guy is not making money, he's going to start panicking. He's be like, I'm losing money now. The riba guy doesn't panic. He's like, regardless of whether I win or lose, I'm going to go repossess his house. I'm going to repossess his car. I'm going to repossess, right? The guy who invested in the business, he's going to start panicking. He's like, how can I help you? Why is the business failing? Their interests are aligned. In riba, there's a conflict of interest. He loses, so he benefits. In trade, in transactions, in investments, if they both win, they both win. If they both lose, they both lose. The more this guy benefits, the more the Rabbul, because they divided the profit 50-50. If there's a 700% ROI, he's gonna get what? 350% profit. So it's a mutual division of wealth. Wealth is created, wealth is divided. It's not a small majority of people who keep on getting richer and richer and the vast majority getting poorer. But bil'aks, the more they invest in people, then the more, and they invest in good ideas, smart people, the more profit will be generated, the more profit will be divided equitably, the more society will be pulled out of poverty. In Islam, poverty is not a way of life. In America, poverty is a way of life. In Islam, poverty is a state. Now we're going to talk about zakah. We'll talk about zakah for 10 minutes, and we'll open the floor for questions. Poverty in Islam is not a way of life. Poverty is simply a state. That state can very easily be exited. And how Islam did that is it creates zakah. Zakah is a beautiful, phenomenal institution. Sadly, the Muslim world doesn't know so much about it. But if you put it into perspective, the World Economic Forum states that $8 billion can finish world hunger. Only $8 billion can finish world hunger. See, in America or in the Western world, you know who pays the taxes? It's the 80%. They work hard, they live paycheck to paycheck. And in America, there's no such thing as wealth tax. Wealth is not taxed. What is taxed? Income is taxed. Who are the income earners? The 80% of the people that own 20% of the resources of the country. Those are the people in the West. Those are the people who are taxed. Their sweat and blood is taxed. The 20% who own 80% of the resources, their money is overseas in tax havens. They have legal tax loopholes. They sit down on gold-plated tables and they say that the tax advisor tells you that this creates tax. This produces tax. A very good way there's legal ways to avoid tax, right? It's an open secret. So the country is run on the backs of the 80% of the people who are the low paycheck to paycheck. I work in finance, subhanAllah. The system is created such. You think doctors, mashallah, may Allah bless you guys, they earn $400,000 or $500,000. Because I go through people's taxes, that's my job, to qualify them. And everybody is in debt, man. You think subhanAllah, a guy who works in McDonald's, they created the system such. He has a Toyota Camry, he's doing payments on Toyota Camry. The doctor has a Maserati, but he's doing payments on the Maserati. His liability is still 45%, They got everybody, man. If you're earning $40,000 a year, $400,000 a year, you're stuck. So the income earners are the ones that pay tax, regardless of how much income you earn. Islam doesn't do that. Islam lets the people earn income. That income is theirs. Zakat is not paid on the car you drive, regardless of whatever the car is. It's not paid on the house you live in. It's not paid on the clothes you wear, regardless of how much expensive, because you're using them. Zakat is paid on the extra money. Zakat is not an income tax. Zakat is a wealth tax. Zakat is what? A wealth tax. Elon Musk is worth $300 billion. If Elon Musk paid 2.5% of $300 billion, that could finish world poverty 3 times over. That's one man. Imagine if you line up the next 100 people. If everybody pays 2.5%, and again, we talked about it's taken from the leakage to the economy. Savings are what? Leakage to the economy. It's taken from the highest echelons of society, injected right back into the lowest strata of society, who spend 90% of it, the marginal propensity to consume, MPS, MPC. They inject it right back, right? Because they have needs. Zakat is paid to the have-nots, the people. And again, we have to understand, we only think about it as helping the poor. Think about it the other way, the other facet. It's multifaceted. Zakat is an encouragement for the wealthy to not spend, to not save. If you invest money on running investments, if you have $100,000 lying there, zakat will erode it away. 2.5%, eroding your money. That's why, you should make your woman pay zakat. They have my wife has $14,000 of gold, just like my mother gave her and my aunt. And she doesn't, and it's time for zakat. She's like, you pay it. I'm like, no, you pay it. I don't have money. Sell some of the gold and pay zakat. She's like, no. So that's the point. That's the point, is to make the wealthy want to invest. Because if their money is just lying there, that's the other aspect. One aspect is helping the poor. The other aspect of zakat is it's an encouragement to invest. Because if your money is just lying there, it's eroding. It's decreasing 2.5% yearly. If you invest it, you're going to have minimum returns. The S&P 500 is 10% a year. And if you invest it in a good business, you buy some brother who just came from Tanzania, Uber car, and you tell him we're going to split the profits. That's a 700% return per year, right? So zakat, it makes the rich people start thinking. It's an encouragement to spend, to invest, because if it's just lying there, it's being eroded. The third thing, zakat is due on al-mal an-numui in Arabic. Those things which grow in value. Cattle, livestock, gold, silver, fiat currency now, because it was originally based on gold and silver. So if you give a guy 2 cows, a male and a female, what's going to happen? Those cows will reproduce and will reproduce. So that the objective of zakah is to make the recipient of zakah a zakah payer. The first year, he'll get 2 cows and a horse. The next year, he'll get a couple of cows and a couple of goats. They will have babies. And guess what? He's going to now start paying. He will graduate from being able to receive zakah to a person who can't receive and can't pay. And then a few years later, he's going to have to start paying zakah on his wealth, which grows. That's the third perspective of zakah. Is the purpose of zakah is to make the recipient of zakah a person who now has to start paying zakah, who has now graduated out of poverty. It's not like food stamps, where you're on food stamps for the rest of your life. No, the purpose of zakah is in 3 to 4 to 5 years, he has now to start paying zakah. He has graduated from person, he can't receive it anymore. A couple of years later, he has to now start paying it. And such times have happened in Islamic history during time of Umar radiallahu anh, and Umar al-Thani, Umar Abdul Aziz radiallahu anh, rahimahullah, that, in the whole entire city, there was no one who was eligible to receive zakah. From the 7 or 8 masarif of zakah, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِنِ وَعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, to the end of the ayah, nobody was there in the city who was eligible to receive zakah. Now it's an obligation. The Muslims are obligated to pay. Everybody is like shaking. I have to pay my zakah. What can I do? What can I do? They all have their zakah, spread out, separated from their wealth. They see a traveler coming from afar. The travelers are allowed to collect zakah, right? To receive zakah. So everybody lines up out of the city. And they're all with all their zakah money, waiting for the traveler to come to dump their zakah on him, right? Now the traveler approaches from the distance. This is a guy who has a whole caravan with him. And they're like, can we give you a zakah? He's like, brother, I'm from the neighboring town and nobody there is able to receive zakah. So I rounded up all the zakah money and came here to see if anybody here is eligible. That's the situation that the Muslim world was in. There was no poor person eligible to receive zakah in Darul Islam when the actual implementation of zakah happened for just 3.5 years of Umar bin Abdul Aziz's rule. So that's the power of zakah. Because you take 2.5%, inject it back, not only does it go through the multiplier effect, increases the economic cycle, increases the growth of the economy, it's evenly divided. It makes the people who receive zakah people who have to now pay zakah. It's a persuasion to invest for the wealthy. It creates love for the wealthy people. See, that's another riba. It makes you hate the wealthy people. Every single Western movie, where do they go bomb? Where do they go rob? They rob the bank. They hate the Indians and they rob the bank. Why? Because the bankers represent the rich people who are, oppressing the have-nots. What does zakah do? Zakah makes the poor love the wealthy. These are wealthy brothers and sisters who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed, and they are now helping us. Look at the difference. That's why in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates riba so much, because it's not only the action of one person giving person $10 and asking him to pay back 12. You're literally messing up the entire economy. You're messing up the balance of qist. You're messing up the balance of the adl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And logically, see what has happened from this economy. The statistics are 95% of the currency in circulation is digital currency. I'm not talking about cryptocurrency. I'm talking about numbers represented. The number of dollars we have, if we were to combine all the dollars, the actual paper in the world, it would be 5% of what is in circulation. All that is fake stuff, just numbers multiplying. And you go into banking a little bit, fractional reserve banking, and you understand, we're just in a big bubble that's about to burst. It's like a deck of cards. You put a card here, and then you put the next one there, and you put the next one there, and you're just hoping that they all don't fall. The way fractional reserve banking works is a bank, as long as they retain 10% of a deposit, they're allowed to loan out 90% of the deposit. So to put it into perspective, brother comes and deposits. Here's how it starts. He deposits $10 with me. I'm a banking institution. I am allowed to loan $9 out as long as I retain $1. And then I turn around, go to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve just prints unlimited money. I tell them, look, I have $1. I loaned 9 of it out. I'm allowed to borrow in exchange of the $9. I loaned out 90. The 90 I borrow, as long as I keep 9, I'm allowed to loan out 89 of the 90. And I tell them, I give them substantiated evidence that I gave them to different people who are eligible. I can then turn back around and say I loaned out $89. I can then borrow 890 from the Federal Reserve. That's how there's so much currency that's there in the world. And then the statistics with real market to fiscal market, the fiscal market used to represent the real economy 1-to-1, right? A dollar had its backing in gold. It used to represent some hours of human labor. Now the real economy is 7%, and the fiscal economy, which was supposed to be a 1-to-1 representation, is 93% larger than the real economy. So it's just numbers. There's just options, stocks. There's so many financial instruments there. The financial economy represents 93%, and the real economy of actual trades and mom-pop shops and businesses and people working hard to make money is 7% of the world economy, right? So it's crazy. So this is all, and then what happens? You have these, because it's an artificial bubble, it bursts. You have the dot-com crash, you have the 2008 housing market crash, you have the Great Depression, the Great Recession, etc., and that's what happens. And in the opposite sense, Islam grows the economy, and this is just a very short, presentation of what can be accomplished when we come back to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we grow our trust. Look, another practical implementation, and I'll finish at this. Every masjid has a couple of $1 million. A small masjid has a couple of $1 million. These big masajid have like 13, 14, $15 million endowments. There's more than 5,000 masajid and musallas in America. All of these masajid and musallas house their, whatever funds they have collected with conventional banks. The conventional banks keep them and they loan them out. You deposit $2 million, they're loaning out $200 million to people. And God knows what the people are doing with the money that they're loaning out. Through the money you allowed them to, you hedged $200 million, $2 million with them. They use that as an asset, as the 10% that they're allowed by the government to hold, and then they're loaning out $200 million, telling them that this is the $2 million we have. So what if Muslim wealth, we're just going to finish at this, what if Muslim wealth empowered the Muslims? What if the masajid at every community level, they created credit unions where, there's so many credit unions, just as the Muslims were behind in this. I was doing some research as part of a school project. I Googled the closest credit unions. There's a Ukrainian credit union 3 minutes from our house. We went there. I said, can I work there as an intern? I said, free intern. I want to see how the credit union operates so I can finish my report. They said, brother, the first, condition to work here is you have to speak Ukrainian, because our credit union only serves Ukrainians, right? And I was like, how does it work? They said, all the Ukrainians that live here, they deposit all their excess funds, not in the banking institutions, in this credit union. And then we give this money to people that are starting businesses, that are starting, that want to buy Uber cars, that want to buy whatever, so that our money empowers us. And then there's credit unions for women, there's millions of credit unions. Look it up. It's just that the Muslim community, we're so much behind in this, which is really sad, because the Muslims represent the upper middle class of this country. The Muslims aren't a denomination that's like down there. Muslims are, every single hospital has Muslim doctors. Every single, they're the upper middle class. If you take the average Muslims of America, they are the upper middle class of American society. But it's just Muslim wealth that's not empowering Muslims. It's empowering the non-Muslim financial institutions that are using the Muslim wealth to hedge their profits further. So what we can start thinking of on masjid lines as the committees sit together, find out what the requirements are to open a credit union, what are the requirements to open, a trust together, use that money to be pooled. It's lying there. Use that money to be pooled to invest in Muslim businesses, Muslim, things, and then those have an ROI that comes back into the pool and grows the community's trust that way. And that trust can be used to build a masjid. And alhamdulillah, there are some communities that are trying to implement this, inshallah. But the point is, what we have to start thinking of, this is the action point. We have to start thinking of is how Muslim money, according to Islamic lines and the law of the land. See, communities have tried this before, but it's failed because one guy has taken all the money and run away. So the way we have to make it work is we have to enshrine it in the law of the land. Get some proper attorneys, some proper, open proper institutions where there's checks and balances, where there's if this goes wrong, this will happen. If this is insured by this, and you have a Muslim community which is using Muslim money, Muslim funds to empower themselves, to grow the community, to grow the wealth of the community. And the ROI goes back into that pool to increase that pool then, right? And so on and so forth. We can give student loans the same way we discussed. We can empower students, and then they give back 15% of their paycheck for 4 years back into the loan. So many different models out there. So many things we can do. But inshallah, we have to give it a thought. And the community, alhamdulillah, we have come to a point where there's people in Chicago that tell us that they would pray Jum'ah on Sunday. Doesn't make sense. Why? Sunday was a day off. They say, we have to pray Jum'ah, we'll pray on Sunday. So that's where the Muslim community was, 1960s and 70s. Alhamdulillah, we've come a long way from there. But this isn't the pinnacle. There's a long way we can go further, inshallah. We'll go for the questions now, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So we'll start with the most repeated questions about the mortgage and how to avoid riba. So many of these questions are repeated. What is the difference between riba and mortgage? How time, value of money will account for in Islamic transactions? Are there any riba free banks? If so, how they work, and are they 100% riba free? If I want 10,000 to buy a car, but I don't have it, so the seller agrees to basically give them the loan to sell them the car with 10,000, but they will add 200 a month over my monthly payment until I paid it off. Is that interest? Is that allowed in Islam or not? If I want to buy a house, it costs 200,000, and I don't have it. What is the solution in Islam? How do I buy? Is UIF in Michigan? Huh?
Speak up, the ladies can hear you.
They will hear, inshallah. Okay. Is UIF in Michigan compliant with the Islamic finance? All of them are on that. So
Okay.
maybe clarify what interest is and what is.
So look, without mentioning companies, because I work for guidance, UIF, this goes into look, what is allowed and what is not allowed. We're just going to go discuss that, right? And then you can ask your local imams and you can ask your muftis for the fatwa, and they can give you the fatwa for that. We're not going to go into fatwa. We're just going to simply Quran, Sunnah, what is allowed, what is not allowed. Look, if you're getting a loan, and you have to pay back more than that loan, that's not allowed. If they're investing in your property, if they're investing in real property, it's a musharaka where they are owning. So first of all, you have to, what's a musharaka? It's a co-ownership. What is allowed? Look, in a perfect world, if I needed to buy a house, and I need $200,000 to buy the house, and let's say it was worth $225,000, I had $25,000. I need $200,000 to buy a house. I can get a loan of $200,000 only if I have to only pay back $200,000. That's very difficult in America. The second way I can do this is if we're not dealing in money anymore, somebody agrees to buy the house with me, right? I pay $25,000 to the seller, he pays $200,000 to the seller. And we can have an ROI, a return on investment for his investment. That's okay, because he made an investment. An investment, he is sharing the profit and the loss with me. What is the profit he's sharing? I can pay him a monthly rent for living in the shares of the house that he owns. Because I'm residing in the whole house. He owns 80%, 90% of that house, right? I can pay him a profit for residing in the shares that he owns. That's allowed. That profit can be benchmarked and whatever. Islam says whatever profit the buyer and the seller agree upon is allowed. You're allowed to, if now in this situation, some Islamic finance companies benchmark that to the market rate. If you were to go with an interest-based bank, whatever interest they would have charged you for your credit score and for your down payment, we're going to charge you 7.5% as a ROI on the investment we made in the house that we own with you. That's okay. Because you're allowed to agree on whatever profit rate you want, right? As long as the buyer and the seller are in agreement, that's okay. That's rent. Now, what you have to make sure is how real is that ownership? Is it just on paper or is it actual? If I was to go to an American court of law or any court of law and ask them who owns this house, they say this guy owns the house. Like, well, how is it represented in real life then? I'm in a musharaka with him. Is it just in words or is it real? So one way they came across that, they tackled that, and so they create an LLC, a limited liability company. That company, it owns the house, right? And that company is shared between the two people, between the investor, whether it be whatever Islamic finance institution. So you have to ask them, how real is your ownership? Is it represented? Can I prove your ownership? Is it just you saying you own the contract with me and it's just an interest-based contract, or is it actually represented in real life? Does that make sense? So now if they actually own the contract through the LLC, right? And then what that does now is allows them to share the risk with you. It protects you. Now, if you're tied, so how an American mortgage works, just to go down that route really quickly, it's a collateralized loan. The American mortgage, if you were to go to Chase Bank, they would give you $200,000 in cash, and they would collateralize that $200,000 with your house. If you 15 years down the line, if you miss 3 payments, they can foreclose on your house. You lose 15 years of payments, and your house was collateral, you lose the house. Now you don't have 15 years you paid how many $100,000, you lose them, and you lose your house. That's the American mortgage. It's rigged against you. How does it work if you go through the Islamic way, if in a perfect world, and how does it work through the LLC? Let's say 15 years down the line, you miss 3 payments, and they sell, brother, we can't work with you anymore. What's the solution? You sell the house. When you sell the house, you don't lose everything you invested because the house was held under the LLC. The LLC had both of you on it. By American law, when you dissolve an LLC, you have to dissolve it according to the shares of ownership. When that house is sold for its appreciated value, you bought it for $225, 15 years later, it's worth $350. When you sell it for $350, you at that point had owned, because every year the shares of the LLC are updated, at that point you own 65%. Well, you better get 65% of $350. Because when the LLC is dissolved by selling the asset which is held under the LLC, it has to be divided according to the shares of ownership. That's Islamic. That's what Islam teaches us, right? On the other hand, let's say you put 5% down, right? The house burns down right away. The house, the minimum insurance is for 80%. Let's say you purchase minimum insurance, HOI, homeowner's insurance. And the insurance pays you 80% of the property's value. To keep it really simple, the property is worth $100,000. You put 3% down. You put $3,000 down. The financing company put $97,000 down. The house burns down. They only give you back $80,000. Well, every single mortgage company in America, they keep the $80,000 and they pursue you for the remaining. That's not Islamic. What Islam teaches you is that $80,000 will now be divided. 3% of the $80,000 will go to this guy. 97% of the $80,000 will go to this guy. He has no right to demand the rest. He has no right to demand the rest because they were in a partnership. They shared the benefit, they will share the loss. That's how Islam works. And that's realized through the LLC.
The stock market allowed, example, Apple stocks. And how do you know what stock is halal?
So to keep it really simple, look, you're not going to buy stocks in Raytheon. Because Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, they're ammunition companies that supply and manufacture ammunition that's destroying the brothers and sisters in the Muslim world. So if the company you're buying stock, what stock originally was representation of ownership in an entity. So some scholars, they say the IPO is okay, the initial public offering, that's where the actual company, that's where Tesla is actually selling its shares to the public. Everything after the IPO is just the shares being traded on the market. It has nothing to do with Tesla. It's just how much the share, you buy and sell shares. It's not, so now some scholars, and that's a small minority. Majority of the scholars say as long as the company is okay, the company, what it's doing itself is okay. You're not going to buy and sell stocks in casinos. You're not going to buy and sell stocks in ammunition companies. You're not going to buy and sell stocks in banking companies because they're profiting off of the wrong things. But those companies that are profiting over the right things, and more than 95% of the revenue is generated from halal things, then you're allowed to own stock. You're allowed to trade stock. Some scholars say day trading is not allowed. Well, the reason why they say that, because if you don't know what you're doing, then day trading becomes gambling. Gambling is not allowed. It has a 50% chance of success or failure. But if you do know what you're doing and you've put hours of study into it, in crypto or day trading or whatever, and you know that the stock tanks at 3 o'clock, comes back up 8 o'clock next morning, you're making educated guesses, you know what you're doing, then you can day trade. It's like you're buying a goat, 2 months before Qurbani, and then by the time Bakr Eid comes, the price of the goats are rising, and you sell it then. That's okay. But if you don't know what you're doing and you're literally just going there and gambling, you haven't put any thought, education into it, that's not allowed because you're not allowed to gamble, right? So on and so forth. So you have to look into the basis of it, right? And see what Islamic law governs the basis. Is the thing itself halal, and is what you're doing halal? What is it classified under? And you go from there. And you ask the scholars. Atina is one of the companies that tells you if the stock is halal. There's a bunch of stock holdings. There's HALAL. That's one of the stock holdings. There's Wahid Investments. There's Amana Investments. That's actually you can actually put that in your 401k. You can invest into Amana, etc. So there are halal options. Inshallah, you look into it, see what it is.
This is about the charging for curing someone. So if people come to someone because of the ailment, arthritis, pain, for hijama, is it permissible to charge them versus those who have hijama done generally?
Look, hijama itself so what I was telling you is very, very, in a utopian world. We're not going to tell all the doctors here that, you're not, because they have permission. But see, even here, hijama, even in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hajjam was paid money for his services, for his time and his effort and doing what he does. It's like a barber, right? So the hajjam was actually the barber in the time of Rasulullah. And it is established that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he paid the hajjam money. So that's for his service. That's not for the act of curing somebody, because shifa is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even if, you can give somebody a discount if somebody comes to you, if they have a need, they have an ailment, and that would be very, very nice of you. But you're allowed to take money for hijab.
What is the best way to convince your parents? This is an important question. To convince your parents to let you get married young.
SubhanAllah, that's a beautiful question. It's really important actually, because that's half of our faith, right? Marriage. And this is, again, I'm going to go off in a tangent, but if it's okay with the brothers, 5 minutes inshallah, is that, look, nikah is part of Islam. It's part of human life. It's so intrinsic to human life that in the time of Rasul, we have made it something so big. See, this it's a seesaw. The more difficult you make the halal, the more easy the haram will become. It's our choice. In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a companion, he saw him with henna on his face. Athar sufra. Different interpretations of that. One of the interpretations is he had henna. That's something which generally is put on a woman's hands. He said, "What's on your face?" He said, "I got married." So in Madinatul Munawwara, where the population was not more than 2,000 human beings, where you have Khatamul Anbiya al Mursaleen present amongst you, and you have Masjid al-Nabawi al-Sharif, he didn't invite Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the marriage, and he didn't have him conduct his nikah, which goes to show us how common day thing it was for them to get married. So it was Rasulullah says, "Ya ma'shar al-shabab, O youth." So then the ulama, they go into this. Who is a youth? Anybody who is baligh, anybody who is past the age of bulugh. The age of bulugh, if you have gotten inzal, if you had a wet dream, you're baligh. If salah is further upon you, you're baligh. If you don't have any athar al-bulugh, you don't have hair, etc., and if you're past 15, you're automatically baligh. So let's keep it simple. Anybody over 15, he says, Ya ma'shar al-shabab, man istata'a minkum al-ba'ata falyatazawwaj. Whoever can afford to should get married. وَإِلَّا فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالصِّيَامِ فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ الْبَصَرِ وَأَحْسَنُ الْفَرْجِ. If you cannot, then fast. It's not the fasting we do today, because in Ramadan we gain more weight than outside Ramadan. That's not the fasting that's wanted. It's starvation. You open your fast on a date, you finish your fast on a date. Keep yourself hungry. When you keep yourself hungry, your body doesn't think about the carnal desires. It thinks about trying to stay alive. So that's the fasting that's intended. So if we can't get married, we focus on that. But here, to be honest, 15 years old now, you can do Uber Eats on your bicycle and earn $2,000 a month, which is enough to sustain, you and your wife. You can move into. My brother got married, subhanAllah, a couple of months ago. He's 19 years old. Alhamdulillah. What we did is we converted the den. The den in the house. We put a door. We got a carpenter and he put a door in the den. And now that's his room now. I'm off limits because I have like hijab with his wife, and he's off limits in the other part of the house. He comes into the garage. He has a nice fireplace and a big swinging patio door in his bedroom. That's his room now. And he was living in the den before. He was just crashing on the couch. We made it nice and stuff and put like a couple of bed and stuff in there. Now that's his room. He's married and he's about to have a baby, inshallah. So the point is, the more easier we make marriage. He's a 19-year-old kid going to college. He looks beautiful, mashallah, good looking kid. So the easier we make the halal, the harder the haram will be. The more difficult we make the halal, he's going to have a girlfriend sooner or later, right? He's going to, So the point is, my brothers and elders, both sides, for the women's side, the men's side, we have to make halal. One last anecdote from the life of the Sahaba. One companion, this is in the Hayat al-Sahaba. One companion, one guy told his friend, he's like, yo, look, you have a good relationship with that family. I want you to go and ask for his daughter for me in marriage, her hand in marriage. There's one sitting, Majlis al-Awwal. Let's say after Dhuhr. The guy gets up, he goes to the house. It's in Islam, you have to treat the guest without knowing his name for 3 days. Obviously, they know him, they sit him down, they give him whatever they have. Why are you here? How can we be of assistance? I came to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage for so-and-so. So they sat down. The woman is behind the hijab, the family's there. They're like, you know what? We like you better. We like you better than the guy. So he's like, okay. So, okay, that's ijab, that's qubul. Nikah is done. The father is al-wali al-asli. He got married. He gets up. Now after Asr, he comes back to his friend. He's like, brother, I messed up, man. He's like, what happened? He says, I went to get your hand in marriage for the lady, but they got her married to me. So subhanAllah, such was the iman amongst the Sahaba. He says, so the guy's like, I want you to forgive me. He says, no, I want you to forgive me. He says, why? He says, I was looking at your rizq. I had my eyes on something which Allah had decreed for you, so I want you to forgive me. So simple was marriage in the time of the Sahaba. And if we actually want our teenage sons and daughters, pornography, my brothers and elders, is a big plague in our society. We can push it under the table as much as we want. Pornography, masturbation, all these things which lead to illnesses in society, illness in our bodies, the doctors can tell us. All this junk which is penetrating the ummah. Before it was girlfriends and boyfriends, and then you had the Playboy magazines. Now it's, a 10-year-old kid opens this up and he goes to God knows where. If we want all this, if we actually want, we look at our hearts. If I want my 13-month-old kid to grow up and be free from all this filth, I have to get him married as soon as he's, able mentally and physically. If that's 15, 16, 17, if he can have a girlfriend, he can have a wife. That's it, inshallah. That's the answer.
This is a question from me. What is the hukum of someone who is in a gathering like this, like the sisters right now, for example, or sometimes, some brothers do that as well. In a gathering like this, where people get together to listen to some reminders or, knowledge, and they sit there and just conversate like no one is there. So loud. They don't respect the time of others. They don't respect that others want to listen, and they distract others. What is the hukum for that? I have never thought of that. So.
May Allah forgive us. Subhanallah.
Be louder so the sisters hear you. We want the sisters to hear.
See, subhanallah, natafa'al bil khair, wallahi. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what does it come? Majalisun, wallahi, may Allah forgive us, that even the person passing by is not, is not without benefit. So inshallah, نحسب لهم بالخير, inshallah, and we'll make dua that Allah include them in the benefit of this gathering, inshallah.
So you want to say the haqq? You want to say the haqq?
Can I answer you? Can I answer the question? Can I answer the question?
You want to answer?
No, question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, we have some questions. You can write it down and I'll read it for inshallah. Okay. Inshallah, with your permission, yes. Some questions. I think the question here is because the brother probably needs more clarification for zakah aspect. So he said, so you said you should give zakah and not save. I don't think the Sheikh said not save. He just said that Islam encourages us to keep the money running. So what if you plan to keep it for the future and other things? Is it better to give off, save for your plans? Advice.
Okay, look, there's a few things in this. First of all, we'll start from the easy level and go to the harder levels, inshallah. First of all, you're allowed to save. The Prophet ﷺ would give his wives the nafaqah of 1 year. 1 year worth of nafaqah he would give to his wives. So obviously you have to save it for 1 year. And they had a problem because they would spend all of it in the path of Allah and they didn't have anything anymore. So then he expressed anger at that. But so the saving which is not encouraged in Islam is like, the guy, he's about to die and he has like $2 million in his bank account. And so it's saving for no reason. It's saving without a purpose. What's better than saving is to invest, right? You can save. What's better than saving is to invest. Invest in somebody's enterprise because then you're getting an ROI and you're helping somebody. See how that makes sense? What's better than that is to spend in the path of Allah. That's where taqwa comes in. That's where tawakkul comes in. What did Rasulullah tell Sayyidina Bilal? أنفق يا بلال ولا تخشى من ذي العرش إقلالا. It raises your hairs, man. It says, spend, O Bilal, and don't fear of less from the owner of the arsh. What does that mean? What does that mean? Short example, we'll finish with this question. Sayyidina Zubayr bin Awam radiallahu anhu. He was one of the people who were considered al-amin. So people would come to him and would give him huge sums of money, and tell him, this is amana. We don't have a bank. There was no bank in Islamic Arabia or Islamic Arabia. They give him money. And they tell him, this is our money. I want you to hold it for us, amana. And when we need it, we'll come back and get it from you. And they know that it's not going to go anywhere. If they give it to him as amana, it's going to be amana. If they come back 70 years later, it's going to be. So what he would do, he would tell him, look, give me permission to keep it not as amana, as a qard, as a loan. Because if it's amana, here's the difference. If you give somebody a $10 bill as amana, you have to give him back that same $10 bill with that serial number. You're not allowed to touch it. You're not allowed to use it. You have to give it back to him. If it's qard, you're allowed to use it. But when it comes in need, when he comes back to ask you, you have to give back to him, right? So he would tell everybody who comes and gives him money, he would tell them, look, you give it to me as qard, as a loan. And now when you need it, I'll give it back to you. So when he died, and what he would do, right away, the guy leaves his house, he would give it in sadaqah. And he would say, Ya Allah, my house is small. I don't have money, I don't have time and space to arrange for all these things. I give it to you in sadaqah. And when I need it, I'm going to ask of you, and you give it back to me, I'll give it back to him. Right? So when he died, radiallahu anhu, he was shaheed. When he passed away, he told his son, Abdullah bin Zubayr. It was the battle of Siffin. I believe the battle of Al-Jamal. In the mushajarat of the Sahaba, after the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told his son, I think this is my last day. I have a feeling. And if I die, I give you the responsibility, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَغْفَرُ لِشَهِيدِ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ لِلدَّيْنِ. Everything is forgiven for the shaheed except for his loans. So I give you the responsibility to fulfill all of them on my behalf. And he says, if you have any trouble doing so, I want you to call upon my master. The kid was young. He's like, I didn't know you had a master. I didn't know you were a slave before. And his father was Rightly so, his father passed away in battle, he was shaheed, died. Now the kid, he goes to the books. We did the calculations in class. It was close to $8 billion in today's dollars. That's how much money he owed people, right? $8 billion. Now the guy, the kid, he was like, whoa, so he started going to the people one by one. Now, Abdullah bin Zubair radiallahu anh, he had a lot of ghanima because he was part of the battles. And so in the ghanima, till the time of Sayyidina Umar, the mujahideen would be given, the way ghanima, the way the spoils of war is divided, is 4/5 is divided amongst the mujahideen, 1/5 goes back to the center, goes back to Medina. So he had a lot of lands that were given to him as part of the ghanima. He had different things, but he had a lot of loans as well. So he started going to the lands, selling them one by one. And he was a little kid. He was like in his late teens. And he says, I remember I went to, and this is how the Sahaba would deal with each other. He said, I remember I went to Ali radiallahu or Hassan or Hussein, I forget. I went to him and I said, my father, it says in the books, he said, I read it wrong. He said, you owe my father this much money, right? Because he was going through the credits and the debits, right? The big books. He said, you owe my father this much money. He said, okay. He arranged it for him, boxes of gold and silver. And then when he came back, he says, I went back and read it again. It's like, oh, it says my father owed him that much money. So I'm back and I'm like, I'm sorry. My father actually owed you that much money. He's like, keep it and I forgive you. Just as he says, when I finished all of this, because the way inheritance is divided is first the loans have to be paid, again in Islam. Once the loans are paid, whatever is left over, the tariqah, that's divided amongst the heirs. So he says, it took me a few years to get over all that. Once I finished paying back the loans, and what was left over was enough when it was divided amongst me and my sisters, was enough to sustain us for a few lifetimes. That's the barakah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in his. And he says, whenever I was in need, I would put 2 rakahs. I would say, Ya Mawla Zubair, oh the master of Zubair, help me, Abdullah bin Zubair, to pay it off. And Allah would make arrangements. So this is the story of saving. So there's 3 ways. You can save for a year. You can save, you can invest, which is better than saving because you're helping somebody else. You're getting ROI on that. You're helping yourself too, because if you save, zakat is eroding it. If you invest it, you're getting a return. And the third thing is to invest it in the treasures of Allah, which is the best.
So, is it allowed to align the loan given to someone to the value of the gold this time, so that in the future it holds its value? At the same time, there's another question similar to that. Do you think the state of economy will improve if gold and silver were used instead of paper money?
Okay, the second question is for sure, 100%.
Okay.
Right? Gold and silver, if it's used again, that's what the BRICS is going to. If you've been studying world economy for a little bit, that's the Russian nation, Russia and those nations. They're trying to peg their money, benchmark it to gold and silver, and then keep that as a scale of intrinsic value. And if you look at the American economy, there was something called the Bretton Woods Accords that happened during the Vietnam War. Until then, the American dollar didn't lose its worth. After the American dollar stopped being pegged to gold, you see the inflation graph go boom through the roof. It's the American dollar from the Vietnam War till now is inflated over hundreds of percentages, right? That's why the boomers, they're like, oh, I bought a house, sent my kids to college, got a car with a job, because guess what? The American dollar was worth so much back then, right? So of course, the world economy would improve. That's why they killed a bunch of Muslim leaders, because that's what they're trying to do, without going into politics again. The first question was that, yes, if you're giving somebody a loan, of course you can't charge them interest on the loan. You're trying to give them loan, qarda hasan, for the sake of Allah. A good way to make sure that the value is kept is you simply give him that amount in gold, right? And you tell him that you have to give me that amount in gold back. Gold has historically very well retained its value. So even if the dollar is inflated, let's say 10 years later, if you give him 10,000 now, 10 years later, that 10,000 will be worth 16,000. If he gives you $10,000, you're going to be getting $5,000 worth of that time's currency. The money has inflated. What's a good way to counter inflation? You give him gold, right? You can go buy a gold bar in Dubai. There's like gold vending machines. You can give him gold stock, whatever. Give him gold. Tell him, cash that gold, and I want that much gold back. There's no problem with that. And if you want to give qarda hasan, give him 10 ounces of gold, take back 10 ounces. That's a very good way to preserve the value of money.
If someone dies before they pay their debt, and then the other person, before they forgive them, they die as well, are their children like supposed to pay the children? I think the question is like that.
So that's how in a again utopian and perfect Islamic world, that's how it works. One person, when he dies, before any of his wealth is distributed to the heirs, first his debts are paid. If in the payment of his debts all his money is used, then so be it. And then the children, they're not going to be held accountable by the state because the estate was already divided. But in the court of Allah, if they want their father to rest in peace in his grave, they're obligated ethically to pay back his debts. Or go ask the guy for forgiveness. That's why in Pakistan and a bunch of Muslim countries, sometimes the guy has debts that you don't know about. So in his janazah, the announcements are made. The son stands up and says, I'm the son of this guy. If there's any debt that I don't know of, that somebody else knows of, I want him to rest, with afiyah and peace in his grave. Let me know now. Or else if you want to say it, then forgive him. And that's, so and if let's say the same question, if all the inheritors are die right away, then before their inheritance is distributed, their debts would have been paid. So that's how it works. And because why is it so much honor? Rasulullah didn't pray the janazah of a person who had a loan, who owed somebody money, until a Sahabi said, I will take care of it, and he prayed the janazah. Why? Because you have to give it so much respect and honor if you want people to give qalb hasan. Nowadays in our country, may Allah forgive us, forget about your money. Give somebody a loan, it's gone, right? So nobody's giving loans anymore. Back in the days, the easiest thing would be to get qalb hasan, because they want the pleasure of Allah. Because so much honor is given to it. Before the next guy dies, his money will be paid back. If that's so much honor was given to it. And if we want to make interest difficult and loans easy, every other guy who has a retirement fund has $200,000 lying there. Why can't that retirement fund be used to buy your house and then you pay it back to him? Because he doesn't trust you anymore. Because the value of a loan has decreased so much. As soon as you gave him the money, as good as gone. So that's why back in the days there was so much value attached to it. That's how society could bypass interest and give qalb hasan for the sake of Allah and get money and get rewarded for it.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykhana. Inshallah, we already added 15 minutes over the time. So, alhamdulillah, I think a lot of people are excited and they love to learn more. But inshallah, we still have a few questions. We will ask them after Salatul Isha, so we would allow the people who want to go home, and those who are interested to know the answers of these questions, we will ask them after Salatul Isha to the Shaykh, and he will answer them, inshallah. If you right?
Yes.
Jazakallah khair.